The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. An article that came out in Rolling Stone magazine over the summer raised my concern. It was about plastic bags, these things. The piece starts off by explaining that American shoppers use an estimated 102 billion, repeat, 102 billion plastic bags a year. That's more than 500 per American consumer. These items are more common to us than a loaf of bread and a container of milk. And we all carry them around and we use them and never give a second thought to it. They're literally coating the earth with a substance that will not biodegrade for hundreds of years, if not more. So what is it doing to our planet, our environment, our future? We have a couple of experts in the studio and an author on the phone who can give us some answers about something that we all use without thinking, and they might be literally destroying our planet. You can weigh in with your questions or comments by calling in at 718-960-7241. You can also email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. So please join me in welcoming from plasticpollutioncoalition.org, Manuel Mancilla. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Gary, how are you?
And also a PhD candidate in the Department of Media, Culture, and Communication at NYU. Her research is on plastic pollution, and she's an author on the Discard Studies blog and a founding member of the International Plastic Pollution Working Group. Good evening to Max Liboiron. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. And on the phone, an author of Plastic, A Toxic Love Story, Susan Frankel. Susan, how are you over there in San Francisco?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Okay, we're happy to have you on the show. We'll get to you in a moment. Let's start with our guests in the studio. Manuel, what's the effect of the fact that all the people who are listening to me right now use many of these things, certainly every week, if not even every day?
Well, Gary, it's interesting that you mention it because people don't think about that exact same question.
It's as absolutely common as can be that you walk to the store and sometimes you walk in, you buy a container of milk and they put it in a double bag and you're like, I don't want it to fall out, so I take the double bag and you go out.
Yeah, and it's because of the fact that these will, as you clearly said, never biodegrade.
Never.
That it's actually and at the same time very easy for them to escape into the environment. It is a common scene of the streetscapes in a place like the Bronx or New York City or anywhere to see plastic bags blowing around in every single block, street, or anywhere we might happen to be walking, and we don't seem to care. We don't seem to be concerned about it, and yet when we are faced with articles like the one that you came across that is describing how many millions of tons of these bags are floating in the middle of the ocean or accumulating in the middle of the desert, we wonder how that came to be so, and yet we have a very hard time putting two and two together as far as where they're coming from. And
is there a way, there are so many aspects, once I started to think about it, it was really fascinating. Is there a way to dispose of this properly once you have it in your possession? I'm willing to guess that we all take them and then use them as garbage bags and then they get thrown away. If you go to any garbage container in the city of New York, go to the corner trash can, you can sift through and find dozens of them. Once you have it, is there anything that you can do with it to properly dispose of it?
No. And it's important that people know that because we do get prompted with, the common person that would come back to us saying, I recycle, I put it in the right recycling bin. But it's important for people to know that for every single plastic bag that is recycled, 5 new bags are due to be created because of the fact that you can only add 20% of recycled content onto a new plastic bag.
I think you're going to have to explain what you mean by that. And then, Max, we're going to get to you. We still have Susan on the phone. So go ahead. What did you mean by that?
So for every new plastic bag that is created, if they want to add like a 20% of recycled material onto it to make it more eco-friendly version of a plastic bag, then you have to understand that for every plastic bag that is recycled, it's actually creating 5 new bags. So it totally...
So in other words, rather than recycling it, you're actually using it to feed on itself.
Exactly.
Max, what is the effect of all these all over the place, literally in the Bronx, in the city of New York, and in our oceans and everywhere else? What is the immediate effect and the long-term effect?
The immediate effect is economic, in that lawmakers, taxpayers, and businesses have to pay for this sort of invisible commodity that is sort of invisible. But then there's also a long-term health effect. All plastics, 95% of plastics leach what are called plasticizers, the molecules, the chemicals that are put into plastic to put the smiley face on it and to make it crinkly and stuff like that. And those get out and they get everywhere in the world. They're in the Arctic, they're in the ocean, they're in fetuses, they're in our bodies. And those have long-term health effects in that they increase cancer, they can deal with brain development. Infertility is on the rise, partially due to plastics, correlated with plastics. And then there are other hormonal imbalances, including obesity, that have been correlated back to plastics and the chemicals that leach out of them. And so the ubiquity of plastics is compounded by the fact that there's also all these chemicals that leach out of them every day. And that's true of all plastics. Silicone leaks a little bit less. Plastic bags are sort of a middle ground. Certain types of plastic leach more, but they all do leach these chemicals.
From a utilitarian perspective, is there anything to do with them? I mean, can we use them? I mean, like, I've got them. We all use them. Max? What can you do with these things, or just never pick one up and never take them into your house and try and stop using them?
In some cases, they can be handy, but the health and the environmental and the economic costs outweigh, I think, a lot of the sort of convenience costs, because you can have alternatives to plastic bags, right, or paper bags for that matter, right, reusable bags or wax or something like that, canvas bag.
Well,
like
I brought this one in just to show. This is a common canvas bag, and you get them everywhere. But I'm going to tell my friends and neighbors in the Bronx, once I read that article, I was like, that's it. I'm just not going to use any more plastic bags. And 2 things happened. I'm going to bounce it off you, and then I want to bring in our author, Susan Frankel. Number 1, it was actually a struggle to go into a store, make a purchase, and you have to literally tell the cashier at every kind of a store, no, I don't want to use the plastic bag. Here's the bag I want to use. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, once I ran out of plastic bags in my home because I wasn't bringing in any, all of a sudden I was stuck with, what do I do with my garbage? And that, I think, is where I'm going to bring Susan Frankel in. Susan, we were talking before the show. First of all, your book is called Plastic, A Toxic Love Story. We can put that up on the screen. But your perspective is a little bit different because you think there is room for one-use bags and those kinds of things. So
No, I don't think there's a use for one-use bags.
Okay.
I
don't want to mischaracterize what you think.
Grocery bag is a product that is on its way out and rightly should be on its way out. I think that the problem with plastics is not, I don't think plastic is innately evil. I think the problem with plastic is that we use it badly. These are for one thing, these are valuable materials. They're made from, fossil fuels that are in finite supply and are expensive to extract. And then we take these, very valuable hydrocarbons that we've, pulled out of the ground, and we put them into things like a plastic grocery bag. We got along for centuries without plastic grocery bags. I didn't grow up with plastic grocery bags, and if you go to many parts of the world, people don't use plastic grocery bags. And I think the reason there's so much focus on plastic grocery bags is not only because they're so ubiquitous, but it's one of those plastic products that is eminently replaceable. It's not very hard to get used to bringing your own bag, your own reusable bag to stores.
Give
It
me
feels funny at first, it's hard to remember at first, but then it's pretty easy to get in that habit.
Susan, give me an appropriate use for plastic, and then is there a way to recycle it, or do we unconcern because it is useful and an appropriate use?
Well, there's lots of appropriate uses. You couldn't have modern medicine without plastic, and I mean that from everything from the eyeglasses that are sitting on my face to, IV bags to, replacement organs, to surgical equipment. My computer has plastic in it. This phone that I'm talking on has plastic in it. But these are all durable kinds of uses. I think the problem with plastics is that so much of it gets put into these disposable items. When you ask about the recyclability of it, you got to remember there's not just one kind of plastic. There's lots of different kinds of plastics. Some are more easily recycled than others, and some are more economical to recycle than others. Aside from the difficulty of recycling, say, your plastic bag, it's not economical. These things, you put a truckload of plastic bags together, it's like you're transporting air.
So for you, this notion of these plastic bags, this is really the problem. It's not necessarily the material of plastic to begin with, and certainly the uses you've just articulated are things that we all use.
It's how we use it. It's how we use it, and we've used it to make these sort of items of convenience without thinking about the kinds of consequences that your other guests mentioned.
Makes a lot of sense. Let me bring in our guests in the studio. One of the things that occurred to me is this behavior issue is that we're so accustomed to it, and so few of us think about it when we walk into literally any store or any other place where they say, oh, well, here's a bag, take a bag and put your stuff in it. How can we change behavior? Can we change behavior, Manuel? Is there something we can do about what's going on with this problem that all three of you have articulated?
Well, we have to begin by something that Susan was touching on, which is that things weren't always this way. We all know that our parents, or in my case, my grandparents, weren't necessarily using that many plastic bags at all. They were all using either paper bags or using their other materials to transport their goods. So if things weren't always this way, that means that there's definitely change to be made. There's room for change to be made. There's behavioral change that needs to come into place, and that needs to happen through education campaigns and by example. In case of, for example, my wife and I, all of our friends picking up on these issues through us and eventually changing their ways, and to their benefit, I might say.
I would like to think also through television programs like this. Max, let's talk a little bit about the politics of it. One thing that was articulated very clearly in that Rolling Stone article, and folks, you can just look up rollingstone.com and search for plastics, you can find it. They really talked about how the companies that make the materials that create these things are well integrated in the American political and capital structure. So to get them to back up, because they're actually advocating for the use of the bags. Talk to me about that structure and how it is we as a people might extricate ourselves from that structure if possible.
Right. I actually generally disagree that behavior change is a good way to deal with it, because I think Susan even talks about in this book, try going a day without using plastic. It's almost impossible to make consumer choices not to deal with disposable plastic. And so the change needs to come at a larger level, at a government or business level. And in many cities in the United States and other countries, the entire country of India, the entire country of Ireland, have varieties of plastic bag bans, where either you have to pay 5 cents in Ireland to get a bag, which eradicated their plastic bag problem and juiced up their government coffers overnight.
So you think it can be a forced change of behavior with some, and frankly, Mayor Bloomberg has talked about taxing plastic bags. You'd be heavily in favor of that.
Well, yeah, if there's no sort of systemic choice.
Susan, hang on, we'll let you weigh in a moment. Go ahead.
And there are different ways to do it, right? You don't, there are ways to either ban only plastic or plastic and paper, all disposable bags. There are ways to ban the most dangerous plastic. There's complete bag bans. Different countries do it differently, and different cities do it differently.
Susan, let's let you weigh in. You were going to say something.
Oh, I was just, I agree with what she's saying. There's a lot of different ways to approach that issue, where government action has led to countries very successfully either eliminating or dramatically reducing the use of bags. When you put a fee on it, I was just objecting to the use of the word tax, because that is something that the plastics industry has portrayed charges on bags as taxes, and they're not a tax. A tax you're required to pay. In this case, if a grocery store says, if you want a plastic bag, it's going to cost you a nickel or a dime, you have the option not to do it.
Right. So it's a political semantic, obviously, and that we know that's evident everywhere. I just want to throw this out, and I think, Susan, this would be mostly directed at you, since the concepts you laid out. There's a story in yesterday's Times, coincidentally, on the front page of the Metropolitan section, and it was the author talked about, he analyzed all the plastic containers he had used just for lunch in 1 week time. So I'm going to list it: 3 plastic yogurt containers, a paper salad box, a paper cereal bowl, which was nice to hear that it was paper, 2 styrofoam plates, 1 plastic salad dressing container, they gave him the dressing in a container, 7 plastic food containers, the rigid ones with snap-on lids, 5 plastic cups, each with a plastic straw, a paper cup with a plastic lid, a plastic water bottle, and 1 plastic fork, 1 plastic knife, and 2, it says, compostable plastic spoons, which he threw out rather than composting, as most of us who live in the city would do. Out of those items, Susan, with your initial statement, are any of those the kinds of things you think, well, there's nothing we can do about? Are all these the kinds of things that, you know what, there are substitutes for?
Well, most of them there are substitutes for. And again, the problem is, take that list of plastic disposables that you mentioned. There are about 4 or 5 different kinds of plastics there, which is why plastic is so tough to recycle. Plastic has we recycle less than 10% of plastic in this country, and part of the reason is because there are so many different kinds of plastic. So, I live in San Francisco. We don't have styrofoam takeout anymore because styrofoam is so difficult to recycle. So restaurants here, the takeout containers are all paper types of containers which can be composted. And San Francisco also has a curbside and commercial composting program. So instead of that stuff going to landfill, it goes to compost. And that's, I think, where plastic, if the ultimate goal here is to try to reduce the amount of waste and pollution that we're generating, we need to make disposable things out of materials that can either be recycled or composted.
Susan, I'm going to put you on hold for a sec. Let's say hello to our friend Mark from Pelham Parkway, who's called in. Mark, how are you?
Hello?
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, Gary.
What's up?
How's it going? I'm going to make a few observations. If you remember when we were kids, you'd go to a supermarket, you had somebody ring up your purchase, and you had somebody pack your bag, and it was a way of packing. It
was a paper bag, as I recall.
They got things, right, shopping bags. Then all of a sudden they went to plastic, because this way when you go to a place like Pathmark, plastic bags, you can buy 12 items, and they use 9 bags because they just throw it in. They don't have to pack it, and then you're stuck there holding 9 bags. And then if you break down those 9 bags of the contents you have, you end up having 2 bags of merchandise. So it became a convenience of the plastic bags for businesses, and this way they don't have to use an employee to pack. The other thing is, what really peeves me off more about plastic bags than any other plastic is, it is setting off the ecological thing in the ocean. When I used to scuba dive, we used to find dolphins, whales, turtles dead, and you know what they consumed? Plastic bags. Wow. And it set off the ecology where sharks even have been found with plastic bags in their systems because they don't know it. When you kill food, it sets off a chain reaction. Sure. I think the plastic bags are the biggest detrimental thing to society.
Thank you very much, because you've led right into this next thing that I've got, and I don't know if we can get a close shot. Manuel, while they're zooming in, you brought this. You explain what this is. And to the degree we can get a tight shot, I'll say to our director, Michael, that'd be great. So, Gary, what is this that we're looking at?
Gary, what we're looking at is a water sample from the South Pacific Ocean. And what happens is when they skim the surface of the ocean in search of what is in there, which they will find organic content, which is the stuff that should be on there. But you also notice all of those like little colorful glittering.
Yeah, there's a blue thing in there. You can see the blue and the green, and up on top there's a green one. People might be able to see there's something white floating in there.
Exactly.
Now, what is that?
So what happens to plastic once it gets into the ocean is that it photodegrades. It doesn't biodegrade. It photodegrades, and it breaks into smaller and smaller pieces. So what you see there is what in some parts of the ocean accounts for 30 times more plastic to organic content, sometimes even more.
Now, where was this found, and when it was gathered, did somebody search around till they got it, or is this reasonably random to just say, well, this is what we're finding in the ocean now?
This is a sample that came from an organization, one of our partner organizations called Five Gyres, and basically, as far as that expedition goes, for every single trawl or every single sample that they collected, they found plastic in the ocean.
Mm. You know, you brought some pictures of a study or an installation you're doing in the Bronx, right?
Yes.
So the first thing that I want to show from the pictures you brought were, I guess, landfills. Is that what they were? What were those?
It balled up fishing gear.
The bullet. Can we show that, Michael? That very unusual. Well, this is the installation, so let's start with that. What is this installation? Explain what this is.
This is
folks, you could just roll through the pictures while he's talking. Go ahead.
This is an art installation that we have currently up at the Target Bronx Community Garden, and it's an installation commissioned by El Museo del Barrio here in New York City.
Where is that? It's in front of a school, apparently.
It's, yes, I believe that is a school, and that is inside of the community garden. And what I did here is use art as a way to tell the story of how plastic bags get into the environment by making a kind of like a clothing line where community members and also the volunteers from the garden themselves would put up plastic bags that I had collected from friends and, just a day-to-day
You don't have to go that
consumption.
far to find a
Right.
plastic bag, I can
Right,
assure you.
right. As a way to show how, for example, reminds people of how these bags will come across in their day-to-day while being stuck on a tree or being, rolling around.
They're literally everywhere. Folks, let's get those two other pictures up that I want to show, which to me, just as an example, much like this one, this is, now what is this?
This is balled up fishing gear that was found by my wife in Bali, Indonesia. And what is interesting about Bali is that while it for a lot of people is their dream vacation spot, right? For everyone who is still willing to go there, the chances are that by the time they get there, their trash or their plastic toothbrush might already be there waiting for them. Because what happens is that when plastic trash gets into the ocean current starts to mix it up around, and it might so be that it redistributes it and might end up in another corner of the planet. And fishing line in this case is it's an evil thing because it gathers all of this trash, and eventually the ocean will push it out, and you might find it while walking.
And there was one more picture, and then we're going to have to wrap up. So what was that other picture that folks know? What is this? This is the same area there?
This is actually Guatemala, Central America, where both my wife and I are from. And this is just I grew up here, so I know what this used to be before plastic got to be so ubiquitous.
One of those could be a soda bottle or something that came all the way from New York, potentially.
Yes.
Susan, let's go to you and let you kind of wrap up. What do you think we ought to do about this problem? Where should we go? What should the people of the Bronx be thinking about as they go about their everyday lives? Do we have Susan?
You start by being aware of plastic, noticing how ubiquitous it is in your lives, and thinking about what plastic you can live without. There's a lot of packaging made of plastic that we really don't need. There are a lot of single-use plastics. Half of all plastics approximately go into single-use applications. Some of those are necessary, like, disposable syringes, but a lot of them are trivial conveniences. And I think if we weaned ourselves of things like plastic bags or takeout containers, coffee cups, so forth, things that we could use reusable items instead, we would go a long way toward reducing plastic pollution.
Susan, I'm just going to jump in because we're almost out of time. So basically, people could bring with them some utensils instead of every time, because they know they're going to have lunch like downtown, instead of every day grabbing another plastic fork, use fewer of them. In my mind also,
Absolutely.
of course, I have a bunch of these in my car, and every time I go to a store, I just grab one out of the back seat and go in and do my shopping. Susan, thank you very much. The book is Plastic, A Toxic Love Story. We appreciate you joining us from all the way at the other side of the country.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Max, what do you think is next? I'm going to tell you, when you're done, I'm going to tell you what I think we ought to do in a general way, but what do you think is next?
So the United States is one of the few countries that hasn't banned the most dangerous toxic plastics. The European Union and other developed countries like Canada, Australia, et cetera, have. And so when you have that list of all the different plastics that man ate out of, that's the main way that plastic chemicals get into your body. And so first, by trying to personally, as someone who eats, trying to cut out any plastic touching your food, microwave, utensils, anything, because that's the main way it'll get into your body. And then secondly, pushing for legislation that bans BPA, that bans phthalates, that bans the most toxic things that can affect your health.
To me, we need the commitment to do it. Jane, you can put up the contact info for our guests, which they've been putting up throughout the show. To me, it's the commitment to do it. We have the commitment to do it, and we'll be able to do it. I believe, this is Gary on his soapbox, we need a national recycling program. Let everybody, you can put people to work, you can take the materials that you get from that recycling and regenerate more. That's a little separate from the notion of plastics, but it's a good way to create a state of mind that we can all do a little better and do more of this and a lot less of this. Manuel Mancilla, thank you so much.
Thanks,
And Max Liboiron, thank you so much. And folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of Bronx Talk are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. Now, next week, in a way it's about the environment, we'll have an important show about the Cross Bronx Expressway. There's a group in Community Board 9 who's had enough. They want to see if there's something that can be done to deal with this terrible intrusion into the borough of the Bronx. And they have some interesting ideas. Should be a fascinating show, and it's something you're not going to see anywhere else, and you're going to want to know more about it. That's Bronx Talk, next Monday night at 9 and every Monday at 9 here on BronxNet, now in our 18th year. Special thanks to producer Jane Folloro, director Michael Arias, Dina, our cast of thousands who are around us in the studio and in the booth. And to you, good night. And you
Coming home can be hard if you're a veteran of Iraq or Afghanistan. You may feel like you're all alone. But you're not alone. At iava.org, your fellow vets are all around you. Join our free online community, get the resources you need, and connect to other vets who know where you're coming from. iava.org. We've got your back.